I've been waiting way too long. Yeah, I've been down here trying to get it. Yeah, I've been waiting way too long.
This video is going to show you how to solve one-step equations. Before we start solving equations, we need to understand what the inverse operations are. Addition and subtraction are inverse operations, as are multiplication and division. For example, 3 minus 3 equals 0. So if I have a positive number and I subtract the value of that positive number, then I will end up at 0. In order to undo addition, I have to subtract, and in order to undo subtraction, I have to add. It works the same with multiplication and division, except when you do the inverse, you're going to end up with 1, not 0. So for instance, 5 divided by 5 is 1. So when you do the inverse operation of addition and subtraction, you'll be ending up with 0. When you do the inverse of multiplication and division, you'll end up with 1. So here's a real simple equation, 5x equals 30. So we're going to solve this equation. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify where my equal sign is. And I have to remember that if I cross over that equal sign, then I need to make sure I'm following correct algebraic rules. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get x by itself. I'm trying to find the value of x. In order to find the value of x, I need to do the inverse operation of what's happening with the 5 and the x. And that is multiplication, so the inverse is division. I'm going to show division with a fraction bar. I am not going to use that symbol. 5 divided by 5 is 1. The x, notice, okay, is still there. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. Now 1x equals 6 is the same as x equals 6. So there is an understood coefficient of a 1 in front of the x. So you do not need to write that coefficient. But you do need to understand that 5 divided by 5 is 1 and not 0. So I see a lot of students, they just cross this out. Well, what does that mean? Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we need to make sure we remember that that's a 1 in front of the x. Here we have negative 4 equals a over negative 8. So again, I'm trying to get a by itself, but I have this negative 8 that I'm dealing with. Well, the operation there is division. Okay, that is a negative 8, but that's not subtraction. The operation is division. So to undo division, I need to multiply by negative 8 on both sides. Now, this is the same as negative 8 over 1. So here's what I have. On the right side, I have a over negative 8 times negative 8 over 1, which is a times negative 8 is negative 8a, and negative 8 times 1 is negative 8. Well, what's negative 8 divided by negative 8? It's 1. So this becomes 1a, which is what we want to end up with. So this ends up being a, 1a. And on the left side, that ends up being a positive 32. So a equals 32. So to undo the division, I multiplied. M minus 8 equals negative 3. Again, I want to identify what I'm trying to isolate. I need to also identify where my equal sign is. This operation is minus 8, so the inverse of that is addition. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides in order to keep the equation true. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. Negative 8 plus 8 is 0. I'm going to go ahead and write this here. So this is now m plus 0 equals negative 3 plus 8 is 5. Now this plus 0 is not necessary, but I just want to remind you that that inverse operation does cancel to be 0. So now m equals 5. Here we have 13 equals 15 plus m. So my equal sign, I want to identify that, and I want to identify the variable I'm trying to solve for. So I'm trying to solve for m. Now the m is being added to the 15. So in order to undo the 15, I need to subtract 15. Why? Well, because I want that to be 0, and 15 minus 15 is 0. What I do on one side, I must do on the other. 13 minus 15 is negative 2. 15 minus 15 is 0. And then I'm left with a positive m, which is just 1m. So negative 2 equals m is the same as m equals negative 2. Here we have 2/3 x equals 4. Here's my equal sign. Here's my variable. Again, notice I'm only boxing in the variable itself and not the coefficient. This is called the coefficient, the number being multiplied by the variable. This number, 2/3, is being multiplied by x. The inverse of multiplication is division. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be dividing by 2/3. But if we remember, when we divide fractions, we actually multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by 2/3, I'm going to multiply by 3/2, which is the reciprocal, and I'm going to do that on both sides. So 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6/6 is 1. So I'm left with 1x. Remember, this 4 is over 1. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 2 is 2. So this is 12/2, which is 6. Lastly, we have negative 6 plus b equals negative 20. Identify my equal sign, identify my variable I'm trying to isolate. This is a negative 6. I need that to be 0 so that the b will be by itself. In order to make that 0, I need to add 6 to both sides. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. I now have b equals negative 20 plus 6 is negative 14. Now remember that you can plug in this number into the variable at the beginning and see if it makes sense. So negative 6 plus negative 14, does that equal negative 20? Yes, it does. So our answer is correct.
I've been waiting way too long. Yeah.